Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. First off, thanks for visiting. I appreciate you coming. And if you wouldn't mind, would you hit the like button before you leave today? That really helps to get my channel promoted by YouTube. Thank you in advance for that. Today, I wanted to do something that harkens back to a project I did a while back in that it uses all sorts of misshapen balls in it. I did one called I think we called it the cobblestone ring. And so I'm going to use something kind of like that, but I'm going to make a link bracelet out of it. And I think it's going to come out cool. I'm also going to alternate some unusually colored turquoise from China as links in this one as well. So, but before we do that, I'd like to thank some people. I wanted to thank my YouTube subscribers. We passed 4,400, I think. Or 300, I don't remember now, but we're getting up there. It's pretty amazing. So thank you for that. I also wanted to thank my patrons who signed up for my premium content over on Patreon. I really appreciate their support, and I'm loving the interactions we have over there. We have a Discord server, and I do some exclusive tutorials for them, and one of the tiers gets some live streams. It's a fun place, and a lot of talented people over there. So if you're interested in checking that out, you should look at the video description down below. There's links to that, as well as my website, my merch site, if you just absolutely need to get yourself something with Chad Silversmithing on it, which you probably do. And you can even, if you just want to tip me for my time, you can buy me a coffee. So check those out, but let's get back to the video. So let's get started. I sketched up some ideas here. This is my little sketchbook that you can get off of the merch store. It's kind of handy. I've already filled up about a third of this one. I'm going to have to order myself a new one pretty soon. But you should check it out. They're nice. They have this kind of graph paper with dots on it instead of lines, so it doesn't interfere so much with your picture, I think, but it helps keep things symmetrical. Alright, so originally I was going to go with something this way and have all of them these kind of box full of rocks thing that I have going on here, but changed my mind. I have some of these turquoise that I got from China Mountain Turquoise years ago, and it's really pale and or not even really green, but it's definitely got that turquoisey look to it. And so I was going to use some of these. They're about 15 by 20 millimeters. I don't think they're very precise, but I was going to incorporate some of those in there, alternating with these kind of rocky little things made out of misshapen balls. So, so I went ahead and I got started on the bezel here. This is going to be a long project, so I'm going to take some shortcuts along the way. Where I'll show you how I make one component, but then I'll do some of them off camera, because otherwise this would be a 4 or 5 hour long video at least, and I wouldn't want to subject you to that. So, all right, so I went ahead and I made a bezel for this one, and I'm going to use on these ones a 3/16 inch fine silver bezel strip, and which is pretty tall. And I'm also I'm using a little bit thicker bezel. It's 26 versus 28. And for the bottom, normally I use 26 gauge sheet for the bottoms of things, but for this, since I'm going to be attaching links to the base of this bezel here, I want it to be a little bit thicker and sturdier than just 26 gauge, so we get a good solid join there. So I went ahead and cut a piece of that too, so we can just solder it down. So let's do that. I use, if you've never been to my channel before, I typically use just hard silver solder in a sheet form like this, and I use a spray-on flux called My-T-Flux that I get from Rio Grande. There's lots of different ways to solder, and nobody's way is 100% right or wrong. It's just kind of how everybody does their things differently. I'm going to go ahead and cut myself some good sized pieces here. And you'll notice on the bezel here that I made for this, I made the sheet a little bit bigger than the bezel so that there's a surface area to apply the heat to in order to bring up that bottom sheet up to temperature more quickly, because it's usually harder to get up to the 1450 degrees roughly that it takes to melt hard silver solder. It takes a little bit longer for the sheet that's underneath that bezel. If you want to, I actually have almost any of my videos show me making bezels, so if you really want to see a more complete one, pick one of my projects where I just have a single bezel or something and watch that. Or there is a video just about doing bezels. It's old, but it should be good information still, so I'll put a link up there. Some of my earlier videos, the sound quality wasn't very good, and you have to see a lot of the back of my head because I had not a very good camera angle going on. So I'm throwing, I don't know, 5 or 6 of those in there. I kind of push them up against the sides. This is not going to be a beginner project. This will probably be intermediate or advanced. I haven't really decided yet. Intermediate in the skills that we're doing, advanced in that it's kind of a long one project-wise, because I have a number of bezels and a number of components to assemble and make from scratch, so it's going to take a bit. I'm just making sure those pieces of solder are tucked up against the side. So you want to heat the outside here, but also there's a lot of surface area on the inside there. And this is a little bit thicker sheet than I normally use, so it takes a little bit more time to bring that much more mass up to temperature, while the bezel up here is kind of exposed to the heat pretty well, so you got to kind of be a little careful. A lot of people use tripods in order to heat from below, and that's a good idea. Once things start going, though, they usually get going. Got a little flow going on here. I'm going to add a little bit right here. I'm just going to make sure I have a good seam all the way around here. If I see shininess on this side, then we're golden. I think we're good. Okay. Where are you? There you are, cobblestones. Okay, so I'll be making 3 or 4 of these. I'm not sure exactly how many yet. But I'm going to go ahead and trim this one down. We're just going to trim it right down to the bezel and then file it till it's nice and symmetrical and smooth. Ouch. Just kind of file it flush. Okay, so I'm going to set that aside for a little bit. I am, however, going to use one of these stones to trace a size on this pad here with a pencil. And I'm going to use that as a gauge for how to put my little deformed pieces of silver in there. But before we do that, we need to make some deformed pieces of silver. So, here's a charcoal block. I actually have a spare there. So I'm going to take some random pieces of scrap out of here. I'm not going to use bezel that's in here. I'm going to use sterling. So. All right, let's melt a few of these. So I don't mind having a few round ones, but I mostly want kind of deformed ones. So I'm going to go ahead and melt these. And they're going to try and ball up round, but sometimes you can squish them and stuff like that. Or smash them down a little bit and get them to be kind of weird looking. Just leave that one round. Kind of lozenge shaped. Ooh, got kind of a noodle shape one that time. Alright, so I'm going to keep making a bunch of those. Various sizes and shapes. So in this rectangle that I made here, I'm going to start putting these things trying to situate it so there's a lot of contact between the individual pieces. That way I can solder them all in different places. And so, let me find my solder, and we'll cut some pieces of solder, and we'll kind of make this into a more of a billet. Okay, got that pretty good. So I'm going to put a bezel around this, and so for this to look normal, this should have some kind of a frame too. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to file this side relatively flat and this side relatively flat, and then I'll use the jeweler's saw to cut this out, and then I'll put a little frame around it. So. As far as materials go for this one, mostly scrap silver, but I used, like I said, the bezel we already talked about, 22 gauge sheets for the bottom of that. I think I might, for the border of this, I'm going to use some 10 gauge square that I rolled flat in my rolling mill. You could also just pound it flat so it's a little bit taller and skinnier. And that'll make for a nice border on this. And then to link these together, oops, that's actually not too bad. To link these together, I'll probably use 18 or 16 gauge round, and then maybe some flattened 14 gauge square for little loops between them or something. We'll have to see as we go. Okay, so I want to do that. I want this to be just a tiny bit smaller than the stone. Okay, so it's time to go saw some stuff. So I'm going to saw down here and down there. Welcome to my messy sawing area. See, okay. Stuff keeps falling off my workbench over there because I'm vibrating, apparently. Okay, clean this up with a file now. I file it down so it's just a little bit smaller than the bottom of the stone here. So now I need to make some kind of a frame around it. And like I said, I rolled through this 10 gauge square through the rolling mill until it was thin and a little bit taller. That way I can use it as a kind of a border for this. This is when I was making a prototype and it's a little bit short. So I might be able to use it on the shorter side of this though. Sure, why not? So I can just actually it's already got one of the angles beveled on it. I'll show you how I did that in a minute here. I want that to line up so that corner is right at the corner. We should be able to get pretty close here. Okay, and I'm going to use what's called a miter vise, or a miter gauge vise or miter vise gauge. It allows you to do nice straight 90-degree cuts. It also allows you to do 45-degree cuts. Some of them do 60 as well. I wish I had saved up for the one that was a little bit more. But live and learn. I'll eventually get one that does the 60s too. It's got a little stop in here that you can put something up against. See, it's not quite pushed up against there, so I need to push it up there. Make sure it's still here. Then I can tighten it down. And then I lined this up with that scratch that I made. I'm going to cut off a lot of it with this wire cutters. And then I'll just use the file to take it all the way, the rest of the way down. Sometimes you get a little of this like burr that's looks like flashing kind of. Pick that off of there so it doesn't interfere with your measurements. That looks pretty good. I got the inside of the 45 is right about at the corners, so that's where I wanted. Really. So I can use this one probably. Let's see if I got this pretty square or not. Yeah, pretty square. So I can use this as a gauge to measure the next one. And then we can cut two that are a little bit longer than this, and then we'll fine tune it as we go. It gives me a little room to fudge with. I wonder what the origin of fudge as an idiom for making room for an error or estimating. It's probably just space filler for four-letter word. Use this as a guide then to measure for the next one. If you haven't seen that cobblestone ring I made, you should check that one out. I was kind of happy how that one came out. So I'll put a link right there for you. We're pretty good there on those two. Now we need to do the sides. Okay, let's see how this all fits together. Honestly, the easiest way to assemble these, I found earlier when I was doing a trial run on this, is to line up two of these, side one and end one, 4 to 5 degrees, and just prop them against each other like that. Just like that. Solder them together, and then it's easier to start assembling the rest of it. So I have some solder over here, so let's go ahead and do that. That looks about right. So I'm going to try and find a flattish spot over here. I'll get this to attach to these sides. Should be easy to add the other ones. Be linking these together like this, alternating them, but I need to make some half circles on either side to connect these together. So I think I will do that out of, this is 16, I'm going to use this up, and if I need to I'll make some more, but I think for the little loops here, if we did half circles of those, that would work, I think. So I'm going to wrap it around this bail making pliers. It's not big even. A little bit too big around. I'm going to have to re-wrap that around something smaller. So I'll be right back. I ended up using this size right here on this other bail making pliers that has the adjustable ends. It's a little bit smaller. So it ended up being about a little bit smaller, which I like better. So we'll put 2 of them on each side of these. Okay. You may notice that I pick solder a lot. That has been the skill that has taken me from being a amateur to an advanced amateur. So I'm going to cut a few little smaller pieces of solder. I don't think I need such huge pieces for these. I think that would be counterproductive. If you're interested in my pick soldering video, I'll put a link right up there. It's really a good skill to learn if you're interested in pursuing this seriously. You could pre-melt some solder on these rings if you wanted to. Maybe another way to do this. The ring will get up to temperature pretty easily, but the bezel is quite a bit bigger. So that perpetual mass issue is always in play with silver. I always tell people to double check their solder joints. You want to yank. Make sure nothing just easily breaks off. If it does, that's because you got a cold solder joint, which is where one side reached temperature but the other side didn't, of the two things you're trying to solder together, and So it just looks like it's stuck to one side, but didn't really stick to one side. Okay, so now we need to do this one. This one with all these balls has quite a bit more mass, so it takes a little bit longer to get this up to temperature. So this is that 14 gauge square wire that I rolled a little bit flat. Let's see if that'll work as some loops here. It's going to have to be big enough to get around both of those. Just kind of see how big of a ring I need here for these. A little trial and error. I think that'll be good. I just got to find something that's that size to wrap stuff around, so let's see what I can find here. Maybe this one. I'm just going to wrap it around a piece of brass wire that I have here. Alright, so it'll be about like that. And I think I'm going to just, like I said, I got 4 of these turquoises here. And then I'm going to make at least 3 more of those things. And we'll see how long it is, and then we'll have to figure out how to make a box clasp for it. So I'm going to do the rest of this, since I'm just going to be repetitive stuff. I'm going to do it off camera. But I'm going to make some more bezels and some more of those little box of rocks things. So be right back. Okay, so as you can see, I've taken them and I hooked 2 of them together using these little flattened pieces of 14 gauge that I turned into little jump rings. And I'm just going to elevate it here. Shouldn't have too many problems soldering these, even though there's other solder there, if we just keep all the heat on the rings, because if you don't get the other things up to temperature, nothing's going to solder to them. So if we direct the heat in a good way, without getting those too hot, we shouldn't have any problems, and we can just work our way down the line and get these all hooked together. See how I'm turning the flame away from the raw piece? Okay, so this last one I'm going to try to turn into a box clasp, but I need to thin it out quite a bit so that I have room to put a box underneath it. But let's make the box first. This is 22, this is 26. I'm going to mount this on 26 and then create a box underneath it. But first I'm going to go ahead and cut this. I'll be able to bend it up on the sides so it creates that cavity. So I'm going to kind of eyeball how much space I want. Gives me roughly where they need to bend. That was a pretty good guess. Okay, I'm going to get this a little bit thinner. Okay, so I soldered a bottom on this after I thinned it out a bit, and I cut a notch in it because we're going to need a spot for a button to be. And got this mostly shaped and filed down to where it should be, I think. So I think, just to make sure I get a good seam on here, I'm going to pick a little solder on here and a little solder along the edge there. And then we'll solder the two together. neaten these edges up. I'm going to neaten these edges up. I also need to put a little back on this. Put the rest of it on too. So I'm going to need a little piece of that. So what I'll do is I'll sweat some solder there, plop that on there like that. One of the things I typically do is and like I'm doing with this one, is trying to incorporate the design of the bracelet into the clasp itself. That way it's kind of a hidden clasp. Trim this back side off now. Last thing I need to do on this is I need to create a little lip that sticks out down here a little bit. So just one more piece of that this 22. Just needs to be long enough. So I want this to stick in just like a little bit down there, not too much. Let's try it like that. So I need to have that lip on the bottom, but I also need to have this slot open, so cut the excess off here. Okay, so I've done a number of things just to speed things up a little bit since this is dragging a bit. This is all done. It's got the lip on there. I added the two rings on the back here. I'll be hooking that on here. This is going to be the spring clasp that slides into there, and I'm going to mount a little button on top and put a little ball on top of the button so that it's right in there, and you squeeze, it'll push that down and release the catch. If you haven't ever made a box clasp, I have a video up here. You can check it out. That shows you the basics. So I'm going to make this button here, and then I'm going to connect everything, then I'll pickle it, and then I'm going to take a long break. 10 gauge? I think it's 12. Let's put a little bit of solder on the bottom of that. This here. I stuck that little pin in there so that I wouldn't accidentally stick anything together. Okay, I'm trying to mount this guy. So this is going to be really softened up from annealing. If we're going to make it be a spring clasp, we're going to have to do a little bit of bending once we get this ready to go. But basically it'll just pop in here, catch like that, and you can push the button to get it out. So I need to hook this onto here, and this onto here, and then we can pickle. It's a good sized bracelet. I think it's probably a man's bracelet or a woman with larger arms. So, alright, so I'm going to heat this up and pickle it. And then I'll clean it up. And then I'll set the stones and I'll show you the final result. Okay, just got done polishing, and here's the bracelet. My other camera quit on me, so I'm just going to show you this way. And if you look, it's got kind of a hidden clasp like that. Needs a little bit of final dremeling, but overall I think it's pretty much done. So. Okay, well, I'm not quite sure what we're going to call this one. I'm inclined to call it a box of rocks bracelet, but because individual components look like a box of rocks. So I don't know if that'll be the final ending name for it, but thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Make sure to leave a comment down below if you have some ideas or suggestions or challenges, or just want to say hi. I'd love to have you subscribe. I put out 3 videos per week, one on Tuesday, one on Thursday, and one on Saturday typically. So there's quite a bit of content. There's some stuff that's good for beginners, some for more intermediate people, and more advanced as well. So if you check my playlists, it's split into different categories, and that helps you to find what you're looking for, since I'm starting to get quite a few videos up here. So thanks again for watching. I appreciate you coming by. Happy silversmithing. Take care.